What can you do? Like who?
Very smart.
So, obviously, David and I work together.
How are you? Nice to see you again.
See you again.
Come back and put the men in their place. You do that so well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for support.
Hey.
More necessary now than ever.
I'm not sure we've met. I'm David Mack. Like the truck, not the bird.
Okay.
Hey.
We're about ready. I have not.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Atlantic Council's Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East. My name is Fred Hoff, and I'm the center's director. This morning, we're very fortunate to have a program that reflects the essence of the work being done by the Hariri Center. Many of you are aware of and familiar with the report of the Albright-Hadley Middle East Strategy Task Force. That report recommended a strategy, a regional strategy, rooted in partnership. The new strategic paradigm that was recommended would have external actors led by the United States working with internal actors in a top-down effort to end the region's wars, and a bottom-up effort to harness the largely untapped excellence of impressive human capital within the region. For as far as the eye can see, the Hariri Center's work will focus on identifying practical steps to implement the findings and recommendations of the task force report. Since the founding of this center in 2011, we've been blessed by the presence of one of the world's top Libya experts, Dr. Karim Mezran. Karim will moderate a discussion on ending the civil war in Libya with 5 extraordinarily distinguished and well-informed panelists. Those of you who are with us in person and watching via webcast are welcome to join the conversation and submit questions via Twitter using the address @ACMidEast with hashtag ACLibya. That's @ACMidEast with hashtag ACLibya. So now it's my great privilege and pleasure to introduce my esteemed colleague, Karim Mezran, who will introduce the panelists and then stimulate what I think will be a very interesting and informative discussion before we turn it over to you for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. I have the impression to be in an interrogation room with these lights in front of me. So I'll do something I'm not supposed to do, which is stand up here and address the panelists who are supposed to be interrogated. right there. Thank you very much, Fred, for your nice words and your presentation. You have all the biographies of the speakers in front of you, so I will not go through them. It's an outstanding panel, and I'm really looking forward to hear what they have to say. We have decided quite a while ago at the Atlantic Council to adopt a different method for this panel. Rather than having every panelist sit and present for 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever that is, we have decided to go through the moderator asking some questions to each one of the panelists, and then at the end of it allow you to ask questions and intervene in the debate. So that makes it more dynamic, and it makes it, I would say, less boring, which is no, a point not to be underestimated. I would like to start right away without wasting any time, and my first question is for Ambassador Jonathan Weiner. Jonathan has just received the highest award of the State Department for his distinguished service in his position as the U.S. Department of State Special Envoy for Libya, and I think you all know Jonathan and what he did for Libya and how he worked for in the service of the country, in the service to find a negotiated solution to the crisis. My first question to Jonathan is an introductory one, Jonathan. Can you provide an evaluation of the negotiation process and its current status, and how do you see it moving forward?
Sure. Late last fall, I had the opportunity to meet with al-Sarraj, the Prime Minister. I met with Haftar a couple of times, and with his senior people separately as late as early December, late November, and I met with Aguila in December. Each of them told me that they were in charge of the country and were the sole legitimate source of power and authority in the country. Al-Sarraj was ready to negotiate with Aguila and on behalf of the Presidency Council and the GNA, and ready to negotiate with Haftar. Haftar's people said Haftar's not negotiating with anybody. He's going to take over the entire country by a mixture of conquest and guile, and will then appoint political people to do the civilian kinds of things, and will rule for a number of years till Libya is ready for elections, and then will eventually go back to his barracks. My response, I was still special envoy at the time, was red light, and we'll organize everybody else as a red light. This cannot happen. Better path would be for you to negotiate a deal with Aguila, negotiate a deal with al-Sarraj, come together for the good of the country, create an interim government, and have elections in early 2018, the 2-year anniversary of the setting up of the government under Skourat. That was the approach that I recommended. I discussed it with the Emiratis, the Egyptians, the Turks, the Qataris, all the Europeans, the Algerians. Everybody pretty much sees it the same way. That's what needs to happen. But the Egyptians 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, got together, Aguila, Haftar, and al-Sarraj, at least Haftar and al-Sarraj in Cairo. And they were in adjoining rooms, once again, and Haftar would not meet. So there was not a willingness to come together to create legitimacy in this country. You've got to get the most legitimate entities, which doesn't mean they're perfectly legitimate, but ones with sources of power. And Skourat is a source of power, as is an army, as is a title of Speaker of the House, and a parliament you somewhat control, to cut a deal. And they've been unwilling to do that. Aguila most recently said elections January 2018, so that part of it is alive. Interestingly, as I was on the way out, Aguila and Haftar's people came to me. Once Mr. Trump was elected, I was in passive mode. I'm going to go solve Libya's problems. My response was, I'm ready to listen and support as best I can for the duration. They continued to come to us looking for solutions. There's a crisis of legitimacy there. No one has it completely. If Haftar is the most popular person in the country, he should get elected. If Aguila is the most popular person in the country, he should get elected. If al-Sarraj is the most popular person in the country, he should get elected. They need to have a legitimation process to bring the democracy forward in order to more fully allow a government to form. That's how I see it. If Algeria and Egypt are working in tandem with Tunisia as a buffer, that is a good thing, because potentially that kind of regional initiative can be energizing and bring people together. It doesn't mean I'm optimistic about it, but I'm not hopeless about it. And there's an opportunity there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much. My second question I'd like to address to Azza Maguru. First of all, Azza, thank you very much for being with us.
Okay.
I know you are very busy, you have a very busy schedule, so I really appreciate you coming. Azza is not only a good old friend, but it's also one of the Libya's best lawyers and an activist and a militant. So we are very fortunate to have her here. My question for you, Azza, is the following. From your writings, as well as from your speeches, I gather the idea that you are skeptical of the whole UN-led political dialogue enterprise. What are the roots of this skepticism? And do you really believe that the HR has a better role to play?
Yeah, thank you very much for receiving me here today. Well, sometimes I feel that your question implies that if I am not in favor of the political agreement, then I am in favor of the HOR. Now, I want to say...
Well, it's a polarized environment.
No, it's okay.
So
Well, yeah, but it's just to put things straight. I think Mr. Weiner said that there is not full legitimacy. Well, for me, there is no legitimacy for whatsoever entity today in Libya. And the fact that you're trying to say somehow, yeah, they have some, or there is some legitimacy, is actually leading to this political agreement that is not going to function and it's not going to work, in my opinion. I am skeptical, and I think I'm proven to be right for several reasons. First of all, the political agreement has its own ingredients of failure. When you say that you require unanimity for all decisions of the Presidential Council, this is what the agreement says, and not one decision has been taken anonymously, then this is a big trouble. How can you evaluate Mr. Sarraj or decisions, including signing agreement with Italy? If there is no anonymity, the anonymity required in the political agreement is not fulfilled. Secondly, this agreement has ingredients of exclusionary. You did not include the ex-regime's people. If you want to build up a country, then you have to include everybody. You have to be inclusive. To the contrary, actually, this agreement includes some wordings that says, for example, we owe the revolutionary our lives. Why do I owe them my life? Why do you have these kind of wordings in the agreement? Or that, you know, we will never go to the dark era. What about this era? Isn't that era as dark, or even darker than the era that elapsed? So these kind of things shows that this was not a genuine, in my opinion, agreement that can be realized. Again, in this agreement, you don't have any mechanism for the international community. Are they overseeing the agreement? If something, if any violation happens, who would tell them there is a violation here? The council, the state council, has been established literally against every article of the political agreement. No one stopped them and said everybody's dealing with them, and the whole process of establishment is completely against, legally. I'm talking here. Legally against the political agreement itself. But no one said to Mr. Swahili, well, how have you been elected? How have you been gathered in this room in Mahari and establish this? Everybody is saying, well, okay, that's okay. You can violate the agreement as much as you want, as long as things are good for the international community, as long as we are satisfied. Now, the second thing is something called the procedural issue. When does the agreement enter into force? Mr. Weiner says, and I agree with him, there's only 1 year that is left for this agreement. Whereas Mr. Kobler says it did not get into force yet. Now, how can this be explained? Can you conclude an agreement without this major element, which is when the agreement enter into force? Give me a date. It's not written in the agreement. They left it floating like this because they want to make everybody happy. So for me, I'm not only skeptical, I think it's a failed agreement, in my opinion.
Very good. Now, we can have a whole day just on this, but let's keep through. Let's move to another argument that is particularly important to me, and I'd like to ask this question to Federica, whom is a military historian from Italy. We are very fortunate to have her with us. And my question is, judging from your work and your experience as a historian, it seems to me that you are skeptical about the possibility of Libya remaining united as a state. Do you really believe that dividing Libya into the three historical regions could be a solution? Is it possible? Is it a feasible solution?
Okay.
This,
Today is a big day.
This touches the whole issue of federalism, not federalism,
No, the
carving out
point
the
is
country.
that in reality, I've never thought that Libya has to be divided. On the contrary, I think that in this way we cannot go anywhere. So the agreement, as Asa was telling, didn't work and is not working. And so I think that what we have to do is rethink all the process, because of course revolutions take time, and so we have to be very patient with this. But in this way, I think things are not going well. So the idea of a federalism is nothing so special, is nothing so revolutionary in many respects, because we have many federalisms in the world, and they are here in the United States we know very well. So there's nothing wrong. I think that the idea of just starting from the top and then moving to the bottom is wrong, because we don't have a state. We don't have a tradition of a state. And people are not used to this. After 40 years of Gaddafi, and before we had a little bit of Idris, but you know what it was, and then we had Italians before, so Libyans are not used to be a state. And so I think that we have to start step by step and trying to, yes, create a sense of nationality, so from the top, of course, but then from the bottom, starting like this, and accepting the diversities of the three regions, like in Switzerland, for example. So it's not that I've never said I'd like to have a Libya divided, but just trying to get the best from the regions. And then, of course, having a government and so on, but a strong localization, I think. Because it's already like this now.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. The only problem I have to this sort of federalism is there an existence of three regions, or why?
From somewhere.
How do you talk about?
We have to start from somewhere, you know, and the idea of the three regions exists. Because since the Italian colonization, we had three regions, and before as well. And they're always, it's a kind of morphological, geographical problem as well. So I think that in some way we have to change our vision.
On this we have a dynamic relationship, because I strongly disagree with it. So, but we are still friends.
Okay, yes,
it proves
of course.
that Libyans can disagree with
Very
someone
good
without
friends.
shooting at them.
Of course.
Nebras. Finally, it's your turn. I have a question for you. You have done a lot of work on the ground with women, youth, and minorities.
Yeah.
This has exposed you to local communities and dynamics. Has this led you to think that a bottom-up approach, as similar to the one that Federica was talking about this, one that relies on the tribal elders, local elected politicians, and influential personalities on the ground, could be more effective in rebuilding the state and institutions?
As an actor from the ground, I will say most of the solution that I can see now, it's started from the top, from outside. Like this is the bubble. No one look inside. You just look outside. You try to contain it from outside, but you don't see from inside and what's the problems inside. What's make the conflicts inside. So from, yeah, give me a second. Hazza, could you translate it a little bit for me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, the question.
Can you just repeat the question again?
Yes, no, in practice, the bottom of the question is, from your experience on the ground,
Yes.
do you really believe that building up the state from the bottom is easier, or is better, whatever better means in this sense,
Yeah.
than the bottom up, than the
I was
top
afraid
down?
I don't want to misunderstand. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, as I said, like it's all the international, they look from outside, they don't look from inside. The problem that if you need to fix something, you need to start locally, as Miss she said, like we start from the cities. Dernas, Beydas, Tobruks, Zwara, Zawiya, something from inside. Each city, they have their own problems. But at the same time, we have like common problems together. But if you wanted to fix, you start like, we will start with Zawiya. What's their problems? Who knows? Zawiya's people knows. So you need to talk to them and figure out how we can solve. If you start doing things from bottom, then go up. Family, city, like we will say region, like one areas, then go to the city, then go to the national, the whole country. It's like this. The problem right now in Libya, that we have like 4 governments, and these 4 governments locally, they are not accepted. They see like each. We start with the GNC. This is the only elected, like we say, the only one the whole Libya elected the GNC, and we accepted
the one in 2012.
Yes, and after that we have the HOR, but the HOR elected by some cities, and some cities they couldn't because of the situations inside the cities. But also they run out, like they have the decision in those cities, like Derna and. If you remind me, Azza, with me also, I think...
Only Darna.
Yes.
That's right. In neither election, neither in 2012 nor in
But also there is people participate, Darna, even they are not elected by Darna's people. So here, the problem, the people inside, or like what they said they have no voice outside, the local, the people itself, they have no voice out. They have the voice? The militias, the governments, people who have the power. And here's the problem, like you didn't communicate with the local people, with the normal people. You communicate with who having the power. Okay, the militias. Why you communicate with them if they are the source, one of the source of the problems? So why you give them more powers to communicate with? This is one of the, also, as I said, the 4 governments or the governments. Each time we have something new. We have 1, 2, then we have the 3rd one or the 4th one, it's Sarraj, the final one. Even with the Sarraj, it was not like accepted by the local because it's come by international decisions. Okay, Sarraj, he did these things, they agreed with him. He signed this paper with them, they agreed with him. Okay, he will become the head of the government, and he will lead Libya. So here, I can see from my point of view, international, they are not looking seriously to solve the problem inside Libya. They need it just for, to calm down the situation in general, but like out the people. Just like this problem, not separate. Not like coming to Egypt or to Tunisia or to other places. Okay, you have a problem, contain it in your country, but don't make it outside. What we have here, we have benefits. So we need to stop in these things. Yeah, sorry. We have this benefit, we exchange in this, and no one tried to solve this problem from the real problems. No one tried to solve it. No one.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Jason, having followed Libya for many years, and from both Europe and the United States, what are your thoughts about the behavior of the various international actors regarding the Libyan crisis, which she just mentioned about? Do you see at this point in time a convergence of interest between Western and regional actors, or a divergence of interest? And how do you view the newcomer, Russia, in the picture?
Well, this is a very important moment to be asking this question, as alliances are shifting on the ground in Libya with the seizure of the oil crescent ports by the Benghazi Defense Brigade, and then whether or not they're going to be handed over to forces aligned to the GNA. I like to look at it that the complex stakeholders that exist in Libya and their fluidity of alliances is mirrored on the international scene, that the internationals are as multifaceted in their alliance structures, which change all the time. So To get some perspective on this, we have to look back to what Jonathan has done and said, that the UN mediation process run by the international community through the UN is separate from, but in theory should hopefully work together with, the regional mediation process, which is sometimes called the Libyan dialogue, but right now is actually spearheaded by Egypt and Algeria. On the one hand, they're trying to achieve similar aims of bringing the GNA and the HOR together to forge a genuine unity government. But I look at it as a competition where different regional and international actors are each trying to, quote unquote, dominate the Malif el-Libi, or the Libya file. And this is a standard kind of parlor game in Middle Eastern politics, where different regional actors each try to dominate a particular file, even if the goal of domination is to be a mediator between multiple actors. So let's use that as a way to contextualize this. As of March 2017, where we are right now, Egypt and Russia are trying to establish themselves as the key interlocutors and to dominate this Libya file. And what are their aims? Maybe that will increase their power on the world stage. Maybe that will allow them to set the parameters of the solution inside Libya. So to understand how we got this to be the case, I think we need to recap the various cleavages in the international community towards Libya from the 2011 uprisings until the present. So to do that very briefly, in 2011, most of the international community was actually on the same page. No key actors opposed UN Resolution 1973. But since that point, things have frayed. And you have to remember, it's true that Russia and China did not veto. They only abstained in 1973. But in practice, they sat out both the no-fly zone and the actions diplomatically. So now, while the revolution was being prosecuted, you had different blocs supporting different militias. And these are the roots of the proxy war that has unfolded in Libya since Gaddafi was toppled. It was present in its kernel form while the revolution was happening. To simplify things, let's look at these as two clusters. There is the UAE, Egypt, Saudi cluster, which is to some extent connected to the Western countries. And then there's the Turkey, Qatar, Sudan cluster. And for those of you who are not Libya experts, you can see these same cleavages playing out in Syria, of course, where the Qataris and the Turks back a certain group of militias, and the Saudis and the UAE work with another group of militias. Some people like to explain this as the anti-Islamist and the Islamist factions, respectively. So that's kind of the 2012 to 2014 picture. As you're aware, in the summer of 2014, we have the Tobruk-Tripoli split. And this merely reinforced those cleavages, with the UAE and Egypt doubling down on Tobruk, and Turkey and Qatar doubling down on Tripoli. As Jonathan has helped me understand, it was really in 2015 that, as a success of US diplomacy, the role of Qatar was more marginalized, and successful mediation efforts were able to move forward to bring together these international actors to culminate in the Skhirat Agreement. However, sitting here as we are in the beginning of March, we have to ask ourselves, does BDB's taking the oil crescent mean that the role of Qatar and Turkey has reasserted itself, and that the proxy war dimension of these two blocs is playing out via the way that the patrons interact with their client militias? So to answer this, we look back to the end of 2015, where the UN mediation under Bernardino Leon culminated in the GNA. I see the US and the UK becoming the main supporters of the GNA after that point, while Italy and France, while nominally supporting the GNA, also worked with Haftar. And to some extent, this has to do with their connections militarily with Egypt. That was the pattern through 2015. But in 2016, developments such as the US election cycle, the Brexit vote, this facilitated a vacuum of Western engagement. And into that vacuum, Russia has attempted to step as the HOR's #1 international backer. And this dynamic of a Russian attempt to achieve dominance over the Libya file, while the West has kind of withdrawn due to internal chaos in our democracies in 2016, we could see this as an attempt to displace the US-UK UN approach. Simultaneously to this, and hoping in a way not to be outdone by the Russians in their attempt to dominate the Malif Libya, we have this regional coalition that Jonathan mentioned of Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt, which could, as he pointed out, reinvigorate the UN process, or it could replace the UN process. I see that neither of these things or any of these things will be successful because leaders have the real power to bring the stakeholders on the ground in Libya together or to align the allies. They're too weak. Therefore, only American leadership can answer this question. And I hope that the Trump administration sees the events of this last weeks as different international actors trying to work with their local militias and Russian and Egyptian attempts to dominate the Libya file. So very complex constellation. To sum up, at present, in my mind, there's a more divergence of regional and international actors, and among and between the different regional and international actors. I see Russia and Egypt separately making a power play to monopolize peace-making attempts, and they want to do so in a way that would favor the HOR and Haftar as their client, but each would do so also to achieve certain strategic interests. In the case of Egypt, to prevent Islamist leakage back into Libya. In the case of Russia, maybe opportunism, things like warm water port, or trading Libya for interests in Syria or the Crimea. In this vacuum period, Western powers have not responded with a bold initiative that could be seen as backing the GNA to the extent of force that the HOR is being backed by their Russian and Egyptian clients. I hope that many people in the room with me today, as well as the Trump administration, will soon want to take a firm stand on Libya, fill this vacuum, and by so doing, coordinate the US, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, and others. The first role is to align the allies. And to end on a positive note, I believe when it's ready, the Trump administration has both the will and the capacity to play a very positive role in Libya and to use a domestic mandate to focus on things like terrorism and immigration, to turn that in a positive way to directly lead on the Libya file. So hopefully we can see that developing over the next weeks and months.
Inshallah. Jonathan, in hindsight, what do you think Leon, Kobler, and yourself could or should have done differently to enhance the negotiation process? And is there something that you could have done, or do you think it was doomed since the beginning, or it was?
Oh, everything has been doomed since the beginning. Since the apple, the snake,
Yeah,
and the
I
dog.
agree with you. I agree with you.
The world's been going to hell in a handbasket for a long time, and will continue.
Don't joke on pessimism with me. You know, I'm the guy who says that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Is a train that is coming against you. So,
Only one train? Not so bad.
you beat me up.
Leon wound up doing his secret process for coming up with the GNA when it became absolutely clear that Libyans would never agree. Any Libyan you named would be vetoed by some other Libyan. He got from 3 to 4 to 6 to 9 in the end through a process of accretion to try and represent additional constituencies for a transitional government. Prior to elections, it happened because the existing governments could neither function nor have legitimacy. So it has been a crisis of legitimacy post-Gaddafi, which has been continuing and intensifying. The best that foreigners can do is to align themselves with one another as opposed to picking clients, having patrons pick clients and have clients go against one another. The fracturing of the country into different parts is not workable because the oil doesn't work that way. The oil fields are down here, the pipes go up and down, the terminals are at the top. Too many people could control them. There's no way to divide things conveniently, even if it was a political good idea, which it isn't. Certainly localities need to get benefits from the oil. Money needs to go per capita to the cities so that you have municipal councils, mayors who have revenues that they can then use to deliver services at the local level. That will be fundamental for the country's future. But in the meantime, you have to have a government that's functioning enough. And in order to do that, you have to have to end the non-stop attacks on legitimacy and functionality, which has been what Aguila has done to el-Sarraj, and what the Presidency Council members do to themselves as well, and what Haftar has been doing by his unwillingness to deal. So yes, it's very fluid and dynamic, and there are constantly people playing games. Whether the game playing is the United States or Russia or Egypt or Italy or Sudan, depends on your point of view, of course, where you sit. Certainly there was no vacuum in 2016. You can talk about 2017. We were engaged in Libya all the way to the end, meeting with central players with the theme, get together, people, join one another, cut deals with one another, Libyans, for the benefit of the country on a transitional basis, so you can then get to elections in a year and create a more functional government in the meantime. It was neutral, it was inclusive, and it was intended to reflect and incorporate local interests and to discourage people from cutting special deals. That's what we were doing to the end. Now, Russia had its aircraft carrier with General Haftar in the fall, and it may well have been that Russia and some others were waiting for our elections and encouraging people to stall. Certainly, we saw progress we'd been making in July, August, and September stall out as things came closer to our elections. So that happened. What's the path from here? It continues to be a path of inclusion, dialogue, having people come together, compromise on a temporary basis, and then to get to some kind of election process to create a more legitimate Libyan chosen institution. Bernardino Leon did what he did because there was no alternative for him. The only other alternative that was out there, which I was pushing for a while and would have pushed further if there'd been no Libyan political agreement, is to further freeze Libyan assets and impose some kind of technocratic mechanism on a temporary basis to ensure that money wasn't being stolen and revenues were getting to different parts of the country, and then to get a political dialogue going again to then pick somebody who could run for elections. It was just a different mechanism of getting what Leon got. It would have been both more rigid and more transparent, and the United States, France, and UK, which would have been the leads on it, would have been made responsible for everything that went wrong in the country, which is one reason the political masters understandably didn't want it. That's the only alternative that I saw at that time. Sudan, by the way, played both sides. It wasn't just on one side. It sold arms to both sides. Foreign minister told me so. So you've got to get Egypt, Algeria aligned, Russia, the United States aligned, Qatar, Turkey aligned, with Saudi Arabia, everybody pushing for an integrated approach. Otherwise, the country will continue to devolve into civil conflict. The fighting over the oil fields, the back and forth, doesn't do anybody any good. It's a way of showing off. I'm in charge here. I'm powerful. You still have to pay attention for me. That helped Haftar a lot when he took the oil crescent from the hated Jadran. But it runs grave risk of destroying the infrastructure. And Libya needs the infrastructure because Libya needs the oil to pay salaries to keep the country going because it doesn't have a diffuse economy. So the policy can't change very much. Alternative policies are policies of greater military confrontation, greater risk to the oil, greater risk to having oil production get damaged and go down, a greater risk to legitimacy. There's no real alternative to the not very good policy that we have had, which was not a vacuum but stayed in place all the way to 2016. Now in 2017, I've seen no evidence yet that our new administration in Washington yet has a policy in Libya that's very different from what we did. The other element of what the United States did last year was we worked with Tripolitanians to get Daesh out of Libya. Daesh does not control any territory in Libya right now. It has cells, but it doesn't control territory. That's a big deal. It can't exploit Libya. So the goal is to maintain that, to thicken the building out of capability of government. They need to have electricity 24 hours a day. They need to have water. They need to be able to import food. Those are basic things. And they need to stabilize economically so that they don't eat up their seed corn. These are core realities. The political stuff has to start with those core realities and then move towards re-legitimation through elections of some kind that are Libyan selected people without the UN or the Americans or anybody else involved in the selection process. That's how I still see it today with all the back and forth that's taken place since my departure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lots of emphasis on the organization of new elections. That's a good, interesting point to analyze. Hazza, I'd like to ask you about your experience as a lawyer. Do you think is the status of the court system in Libya? What role can they play? You have appealed to the courts for invalidating the recent agreement with Italy. It means there's a signal that you believe in the functioning of the court still, that you believe in there is some independent entity that could still play a role in supporting the nation building.
I just want to say something which is related to your question, but just to answer Frederica's point. Frederica is a historian, so she looks at the thing from a historian point of view, whereas I look at things from a legal point of view. Libya is a state. Legally, it is a state. So if it's not, then is Qatar a state? Is the UEA a state? If these are states today, then Libya is a state. There's difference between identity and state as per se, as a state. And I just want to say something that 3 months ago, I came to the States here, and I was taking the plane, I think, from Toronto to I don't know where, Boston, yeah. And someone asked, who is from the U.S.? No one said, I'm from the U.S. Everybody said, I'm from California. I felt very relieved. I'm from Colorado. I'm from New York. I said, well, if these people think that they belong to this city or to this state, then why not we feeling I'm Tripolitanian or he's from Benghazi or he's, it doesn't make, it's not something that we should develop. Libyans, for 6 years now, 6 years of fightings, let's say, they did not reach a point where they are divided. And this is chapeau for Libya. This is how we could see things. If we are not divided during these 6 years of hatred and civil war, then we are not going to be divided. Unless, as you said, Mr. Jonathan, it was very clear that the international or the foreign intervention are sending Libya to a whole-scale civil war. And now you have to rethink and say, does these people, you mentioned the head of the HOR, the head of the GNC, the head of the whatever, are these representing Libya now? Well, Mr. Aguila is a speaker. He is a speaker of the HOR. Mr. Sarraj is appointed by the international community. He has no whatsoever legitimacy from the inside. Who else? Oh, Mr. Haftar, he's a military man. He's a military. He should not be involved into any political deal. So are these people going to solve our problem? They're not. Don't expect these people to solve the problem. They're already in power. And they're already getting power that they don't have, they don't deserve. And they have no legitimacy. So are we expecting to deal with them to reach elections? I don't think so. I frankly don't think so. Now, with, as you said, mentioning the legal or the judiciary in Libya, let's just tell you something. The judiciary is an old institution, whereas the executive and the legislative are new. So you cannot compare these three together, because even if it's affected, the judiciary is affected by war, but still it cannot collapse right away like when you see with the executive or the legislative, because these are new institutions, whereas the other one, the legislative, is an old institution. So it has its own immunity. Taking into consideration also that the judiciary in Libya went through 45 years of civil war, 45 years of dictatorship. So it had some sort of immunity, it developed an immunity, and it knows how to deal with certain circumstances. If you know how to deal with the dictatorship, then you are able also to deal with the civil war somewhere. But I think I cannot exclude that the judiciary has not been affected by the war. No institution in Libya, not one person even, has been not affected by war. So I know that there is an effect on the judiciary, of course, but still, I still trust that the judiciary can do something. And even in the case I brought against the Presidential Council related to the invalidation of the MOU agreement with Italy. I have to also admit that the judiciary has been affected more in the criminal side of the judiciary. So criminal courts are affected, of course, more than the civil and the administrative courts. So I still think that you need someone to oversee what's happening with the legislative part and with the executive branch. So who would I go to? I have to go to the judiciary. I have no other choice. But let's see what's going to happen. Maybe it's next Wednesday that the judgment's going to be announced.
Good. And since we are in the talking about Italy, I'd like to ask Federica the difficult question. How do you judge the Italian government's behaviors toward the Libyans?
Okay. Well, first
If
of
they
all,
strip you of your citizenship, we will give you
no,
one.
okay. No, first of all, I'm talking about federalism as a not because I don't think that Libyans are not united, but because I think that from I see the diversity, okay, not only in the region, within the region, but between the regions, but within, like a strength. So I think that as an Italian, I feel, even though I was not there, of course, but I feel responsible in many respects from what Italians did in Libya. So I really wish the best to the country, and I want to tell you this. But first of all, I think that with if we see the diversity and we use it like a strength, maybe we can have more than without seeing this, without accepting this. So that is my point of federalism. A united Libya, strength in the regions with strong local governments, and a united government, so acting, as you said, from both and top. And it's of course, it's very complex. I'm not telling that it's easy and it's something that we can have tomorrow. But my idea is this. And talking about Italians, at least I think that their vision has been coherent. Okay, so they started with Tripoli, and then with supporting the GNA and Serraj, and they are keeping on doing this. So at least they do not change mind. I do not agree so much, Jason, with the fact that Italy has been with Serraj and with Haftar and so on. I'm not so sure about this. And about, well, the behavior right now and their ideas, I think that the idea of opening, reopening the embassy, it's been not such a good idea because Libya is not enough stable at the moment to have an embassy right now, and with Haftar on the other side that can keep and use this opening like a tool, and like a political tool to attack and to divide again. So I'm not so sure that this has been a very good idea, frankly. But of course, I'm not a diplomat, so maybe you could answer. I don't know.
Sure. I'm in favor of foreign embassies being in Libya, as many as possible and as many locations as possible in safety. You don't want them to be able to be driven out again. I think it's helpful having them present. You get more information. You get Libya more connected to the rest of the world. That's a good idea.
But in terms of security?
It's pro-security over time. Having more foreigners there improves the security situation. One of the reasons Benghazi was able to become a site for so many assassinations and murders was the international presence, having been attenuated, gave more play to the bad guys to be able to then increase their role. And that's how I think about it. In terms of support at the local level, assistance and development money should be delivered as locally as possible to build up local capacities to provide service to Libyans. That's true in any country that needs development. It's particularly true in Libya, where the central government can barely do the big things. Central government should be focused on electricity, funding education, and making sure there's gasoline coming in, power, getting the currency into the banks and so on.
That's my point.
Yeah, and so I agree with that point completely. And the problem that we had and that other countries had of would-be donors is it didn't matter what city you were working in. It didn't matter what project you had. Getting stuff done in Libya was very hard for all kinds of different reasons, regardless of donor. It worked better at the local level than it did at the national level, but it didn't work great. So I don't know of any debate. I don't know of anyone who thinks it shouldn't happen at the local level. Everybody who works it thinks it's best being delivered at the local level as you can, but you have to have the right service providers who can stay there, live there, be in safety. One of the complicating problems with criminal groups generating revenue from kidnapping people purely as a matter of revenue, which is complicating the situation a lot in 2013 and 14. By 2014, of course, pretty much all the foreigners left, which is very bad for Libya. If most of the foreigners left Washington, it would be good in terms of traffic, but in every other way, it would be just awful for us, very damaging. And Libya is not as strong, Tripoli isn't as strong as Washington.
Nebras, talk about ISIS or IS or ISIS, or whatever you want to call it. After Sirte, is there a future for this kind of organization, or similar ones in Libya? Do you think that these kinds of organizations could put roots in the Libyan social fabric and prosper, whether there is a state or not?
Okay.
In other words, is there room for those kind of organizations in the social fabric of the country?
It's a very big subject. So it's about ISIS.
We have time. We have the room for a long time.
And just excuse my language. I'm not like perfect English, so that's why.
Better than mine.
I hope so. Yeah. By my, I will say my own expert. I mean, how they start, and especially in the east side, like. I will say from the beginning when Gaddafi came out in his speech and he said like the east side, and he is specific in Derna and Benghazi, it will be like kind of ISIS, and not ISIS, it will be like extremists, exactly to be. In that time, we had the person, he came to the city, his name is Gumu. So Sufyan bin Gumu. He came. He was not in Derna, but he came in that time and he stayed in Derna. I mean, in general, or as Libyans, anyone he come and stayed, we don't like. Okay, yeah, we know someone. He is not from the city, but when he come, he is welcome. He is Libyan, so we don't have a problem with that. But during the revolution, we start like see kind of, I will say, a group come out. From the city, how they came in, how they get, they came in and they start kind of a training inside the city. Then I wrote about that too much. Like we have this kind of a group, like start with 7 or I will say 6, 10 people, then become bigger and bigger. That time we announced the government, Mustafa Abdel at that time, we have this. He said, okay, Nebras, now we have facing Gaddafi, then we will look inside. Anyway, we have this kind of a group. They start in, but they have no power in that time. But when we look like in 2012, here we have, before the Gaddafi gets killed in 2011, they become more strength, but in hidden. No one was focused in this subject. No one was like believed that we will have this kind of subject in Libya. We know that we have some people, Gaddafi's, like some of them sent out of Libya, and some of them they were in the prison, and they came out during the revolution because he take out most of the prison people, especially in Tripoli, and to fight with him. What I wanted to say, the extremism starts because, I will say from the youth, because they find the revolution starts for the youth. Okay, the youth, they will have, the youth, they will have this kind of position. We should think more of the youth. We should give them more opportunities. But after the revolution, and what happened, the youth, they find themselves out of the game. And they find themselves out of tensions. So here they split. Some of them, they involved with the extremism, extremism, yes. And some of them, they become what they believe, more liberal. So here we have kind of division, or two sides with, sides against. why this group come with this, like to be more extremism? Why they choose to be with this side? Is it like kind of religion? Is it kind of like, okay, I have no hope anymore for this life, so I decide just like to die, and like what they think, okay, if you die, you go to the heaven? And, or like it's a kind of, okay, I have no power, I was a criminal, and then suddenly I have money and I have power, I have a word in this area, so I will be more powerful. Here starts, I will say, the problems, especially in the east side. We have people, they have already conservatives, like muhafidin, conservatives. So
Conservatives.
Conservatives, yes. So this kind of a group become more, I will say, conservatives after the revolution. Why? This is kind of a question that I really was looking, and I'm trying to understand in Libya what's going on, what's happened. After a while, in 2013 and 14, this kind of, especially like after the, they said like we will have the militias, they will have, everyone fight against Gaddafi or a fight in the front line, they will have salaries and monies and these things, so we start having these fake militias. Even with the names, they are already were fighting front lines, like Abu Slim, like Salah ad-Din, like a lot of names of militias, they were fighting. But when you come back, it's not the same people who are wearing the front line. We start having these fake militias with the huge numbers. Already, if you have the huge numbers in the beginning of the revolution, if they are really were fighting in the front line, so Gaddafi, like he will never stay for 2 months or 1 month. But in general, no. Because who are fighting, like it's very like, how much? 100,000, 200,000, it's maybe less. Yeah, here, each city, I will say expert from Derna because I'm from Derna, and I will say from Benghazi because it's my around Derna, Beda, Benghazi. We have this kind of, I mean, these groups came out, like in 2013, we had more than 13 kind of groups, extremists. Each group different than others. How they came out, no one knows. 13 kinds. Imagine that. You have 13 kinds of extremism in one city, in one small city. They try to control the city, but because each group, they are the same power, because they are the same, I will say, level, so they couldn't manage the situation in the city.
They were all from Derna?
No.
That's an important point. How many of these people were coming from outside?
Actually, if I will say at the beginning, it was just like, I will say 5% Libyan and 95% outside of Libya. Different kind of nationality. And if you see like how the way they came in and how they stay and give kind of a training, then get out and lift the country. And each group, they have a level. One of them like stay 1 week. The other group stay for 2 weeks. Like each, I don't know how they do that, but like they have this kind of, yes. So here, I mean, if they come in and they train, they're using youth. I mean, children. They age like 14, 15, they still like come up to the life. And when they have money, in that time, the country out of money. Salaries, there is no. 50 dinar, Libyan dinar. And this money, it's just like we say, it's enough. It was enough that time. But for the youth, if you give him 100 or 1,000 dinar, at that time, they would be kind of luxury. Oh my God, I have money in my pocket without doing anything. Then they try to wash their minds. you will be a leader. You will be a responsible person. Even if he was a child, they will give him kind of powerful. You will be a person in this group. You will be responsible about this group. You will be. So they try to give them kind of, I don't know how. They wash their brains. Then after that, and no one look behind them. No one if you see a child, his parents divorced, so no one care if he went to this group or no. No one will care. So, okay, he become an ISIS, or he become an extremist, or he become Al Qaeda. No one will care.
Okay.
Yeah, I told you it's a very long story. So you said I have my time.
I was joking.
Anyway, I will try to explain.
As usual.
I
God,
will
my
say
jokes,
that.
I will kill myself for my jokes.
I will try to make it short, but the conclusion of what I tried to say, that the youth in Libya, they suffered, and no one exactly gave them an attention, and became a blame. Actually, if you say, Libya, we have an ISIS. Okay, we have an ISIS, but not all of them, they are Libyans. So become like Libyan nationality, it become kind of a ghoul or a bouga, or how you say that, ifrit. A ghost, yeah. So if he come from Libya, that means he have a question, bigger question. No, that means you push him to go to that side. We try to find, this is one of the problems that internationals, no one work in it. And that's what I mean, like no one work locally to solve a lot of problems. No one try to contain this youth and give them kind of hope. No, if each time they push in the corner and in the dark side, so I don't care. You want it, and you are from this country. You are like 100% an extremist. So no, you push even if he was not. So you push him in this corner. So this person or this, those youth, they find themselves like they have no solution. They have no hope, especially now. Libya, what's the future of Libya? What should I do as a person, as a youth? I'm thinking from the youth side. What should I do? Should I like go with this groups, extremists, to have my life? Or should I try to solve the problems? Having a hope, like, I don't know how can I explain it, but it's very hard.
Yes. John, sorry, John, you want to say that?
Yeah, what the United States was trying to do with Ali Zaidan, and what the French were trying to do with the police, and the Italians are trying to do also with the General Purpose Force, and the Turks, was to provide a way of recruiting young men out of militias and in general, and give them a purpose, a security purpose, give them something to do to get them away from the gangs. Because what you're describing is classic gang activity. You provide gold, guns, girls, glory, God in the gang, all the things that you want to secure a young man at very little cost, and organize them that way at a time that society is not providing a lot of alternatives. The efforts in 2013 and 14 were to begin to provide alternatives. They failed, as the Libyan political system was incapable of spending money due to its own divisions internally in support of projects. Almost every kind of assistance project, even at the local level, failed. Not all of them, but most of them, because of differences among Libyans over who should get the money and what projects should actually come into place. So the one group of people who were capable of organizing people were the extremists and the militia leaders. And they got people organized into gangs. And that's the phenomenon you're describing. And it needs to be broken up with alternatives, which requires a certain amount of development activity, but also political consensus on how to do it. The gang model is failing Libyans. That's why Daesh doesn't control any territory. Derna is a particular problem, but even in Derna, the local Libyan extremists kicked out the foreign Libyan extremists after inviting them in. As near as I can tell, that's what happened.
I agree with that.
So Libyans don't like other people telling them what to do, but they do need to be able to get organized into viable constructs for living. And the governments have been unable to do that, which takes us back to why it's important to get that carried out at the local level.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I
I have one last
just,
question.
give me a minute. What do you mean by Libyan? They don't take, I'm sorry.
What did you say?
He said Libyans, they don't like to take orders. And
Yes, they don't like foreigners telling them what to do, and some of them don't even. A lot of them don't even like other Libyans telling them what to do.
It's very anarchic
Perfectly
society.
human.
I have one last question for Jason, then we'll pass to the question from the public. As director of the United States Libya Business Association, you have frequent contacts with U.S. companies who are more involved with Libya. Do you see any potential role for them to play in engaging the U.S. administration policies towards Libya?
So I do, and to connect some of this discussion that we've had to this question, I think Ambassador Weiner has said very crucially that the international community must move from each country having its client to uniting the allies behind one process. However, sensible people can disagree as to how much of a role we need in the Libyan process. So when I referred to a vacuum earlier, I want to see a heavy stick and not just some of the carrots that were used. And I think that's important as we begin to think about the business issue. So for Libya to be a successful state, it needs, obviously, imports of key essentials like food, construction materials, consumer goods, services in every sector. And as we see now, electricity generation equipment, given the power outages that plague the country. So whether it's infrastructure design, project management, oil field services, development, education, every sort of capacity building. And the Libyan authorities know and acknowledge this. There's no disagreement here. On the question of US companies in particular, many of them have extensive experience working in Libya. And of course, they'd like to play a key role in helping in reconstruction efforts and lending their expertise to get Libya up on her feet again. Whether the new administration will work with the US Libya Business Association, USLBA member companies, and draw on them as a resource to enact US foreign policy goals in Libya, this is really anyone's guess. I hope a synergy can be achieved, but I've seen no example of this collaboration happening or even inklings of it as of yet. However, it would certainly stand to reason that Secretary Tillerson understands the huge behemoths of skill that he can access in the American private sector, and that given his own private sector experience, he would draw on them. Whether Trump will in fact nominate a special POTUS envoy or a State Department envoy to replace our esteemed colleague here, will he give him enough power to throw that stick around to not only coordinate the allies abroad, but coordinate the interagency problem inside the US? Who knows? Will he also have the ability to incentivize the US private sector? Again, no one knows if Trump will appoint such a person and create that powerhouse that would be needed to get these things done. I think there's a decent chance for this to happen. But all I possess is a murky crystal ball. It's clear to me that if Libya is going to work and be a key part in the global fight against ISIS and jihadism, obviously it needs to provide jobs for its citizenry. We need to have bottom-up structures like the whole panel has said. I don't see them at the regional level. I see the regional level as another bugaboo, and if you look into Libyan history, there really has never been regional government, neither under the BMA nor in the Ottoman period. So I see it needing to happen at the local level, and that local capacity building needs every sort of development agency and the private sector in the US and elsewhere. And without that, the concerns that this administration might have about security, migrants, radicalization, arms trafficking, I don't see any of that being able to be dealt with. What's the hope here? The hope, of course, is that the Trump administration might see Libya as a legacy issue. They'd like to see they'd like to see a success where they perceive Obama and Hillary failing on the Libya file, as I've defined it. So I hope that even if they're doing it for domestic political goals, they'll get out in front of this Libya issue. They'll seek to align the allies, and not just align them for international best practices of mediation, but for throwing down serious sticks. Oh, UAE, oh, Qatar, you didn't do what we said. There'll be repercussions in other economic or strategic dealings. Libya is now a top priority. And once that happens and we have that kind of impetus, I see the question as being not what happens for U.S. businesses in supporting Trump administration objectives in Libya, but rather, why don't we reverse it? How will the Trump administration see Western business concerns in Libya as a key tool to get the country back up on its feet again? And when you look at all the main questions that the country faces, I can only see private sector solutions for them. So we haven't discussed today letters of credit, back payments, devaluation of the dinar, the gap between the black market and official rates. All of these things can only be addressed with some role of international private sector. So I see the role of Western countries in helping the Libyan authorities as incentivizing the role of the international private sector in helping provide solutions and helping Libya out of this moment of, whether you call it dysfunction or political turmoil. And it, it's not going to be easy, but leadership on the international level will allow a business and private sector driven solution, hopefully, to arise in Libya from the local level and moving in a bottom-up way in parallel with the political process about which we've spoken.
Thank you, Jenny. Haza, do you want to say something
Just
before
one
I
thing.
pass to the public?
Yeah, please. I don't think it's the right approach to speak about ISIS without speaking about extremism in general. There are other groups in Libya who are extremists. So let's not only focus on ISIS and leave others, such as Al-Qaeda and others, who are also groups that are of concern. Now, today we're speaking about the brigade, the Benghazi brigade that entered the crescent, the oil crescent. And Egypt has overtly said that some of these elements are Al-Qaeda. And also, there are also allegations that some of Haftar's groups are extreme Salafists. So it's not as easy as one group that we had to focus on and leave others who are infiltrated within the political negotiations and the political process. This has to be clear, in my opinion, and not only to concentrate on ISIS. The other thing is, let me finish this one.
Yes,
the other thing is, fighting extremism is not the work of Libyans only. This is the work of the world. Don't ask Libyans too much. I mean, we heard today from both Jason and Mr. Weiner that there is too much involvement of international states, of foreign states in Libya. It's too much. What I heard today, it's too much. So don't ask Libyans to solve this issue. It's not a Libyan issue anymore. It's out of our hands now. And therefore, the pressure should be made and coordination should be made among these states to stop. They have to stop. And the fact that we need assistance to fight terrorism or illegal migration, it's an assistant. It's cooperation. It's not an assistant, actually. It's cooperation of the world because we are in the heart of the world. We are in the Mediterranean basin. And all of these countries are going to be affected of what's taking place.
But I want to say, I mentioned that and it was like 13 groups, not just ISIS.
No,
like
I agree. You said that.
13.
Yes. With regard to Mr. Weiner, you said that the system of building up police and army didn't work. Well, also the approach was wrong. You can't just send people without proper vetting to Turkey and England and other. The vetting inside Libya was not right, and that from the start. And also, my question here is: do we need an army? Frankly, do we need army in Libya? Don't we need more police? Why are we concentrating much on army?
The French tried training police. The French had a program to train 3,500 police.
I agree, but
they got 35 trained.
Yes, I didn't interrupt you. So just let me finish. I did, but what happened in England with some of the people who were sent there, it's a failure, and there is something that went wrong. You can't just divide people and say you go to Turkey to have a different allegiance than someone who went to the UK. This is not how we build an army. Meanwhile, in my opinion, the approach should have been to get these young people out of the army and not to absorb them within the army. Why not thinking that way? Why taking them out of the army, the militias, rather than pushing them hard and make them an official army? Thank you.
But no one mentioned the times. like we start finding solution. I'll try to find solution. After a while, like after they separate in the country, like it's not from like they didn't contain it from the beginning or like from 2000. I will say from 11 up to 13. They know up to that time we have a kind of extremism, but no one tried to find a solution before it gets separate in the whole country. After it gets separate and after it become really dangerous, serious dangers and serious threats, here we start thinking, oh, Libya start become a really serious problem, not just in Africa, in Europe, and in the whole world, because the situation, also the geographic location of Libya, it's a threat. It's good and bad.
I see your point.
However, that was a product of the appeasement of the militias. I mean, it was just here in this room that Karim and I launched a paper 2 years ago explaining what happened in the 2011-2013 period. And I think it is vastly incorrect to lay this particular problem on the international community. It was a deliberate strategy of Jibril, El-Kib, and Ali Zidane to appease the militias, to bring them into their own security apparatus by paying what amounted to bribes, which were, the quote-unquote salaries. And this problem has continued with the Tobruk-Tripoli split. I like to point out, and many of you know, but it is so humorous, it always bears repeating, that this is the first civil war in history where one entity has paid both sides of the civil war. The Central Bank of Libya.
Not just all sides.
That's what I meant. I was simplifying. And it's certainly the first time in history that all sides of a civil war have been financed by one entity. And that really is the underpinning of the growth of not only the Islamic State, but all of the jihadi actors in Libya. And they're understanding that financing mechanism and that a tendency towards appeasement has to factor into a different approach. I see a stick-driven approach towards the nascent Libyan authorities, both at the local and international level, rather than a carrot-driven approach, which I believe has failed.
Sure. One last comment, John.
It's clear that we should not have moved ahead to create a general purpose force. The British training failed, the Italian training failed, the Turkish training failed, the United States training, which involved extensive vetting, didn't get started because we did so much vetting in order to avoid everything else.
You excluded everyone else.
And we would have gotten ahead, we would have been able to make it work, of course, if Ali Zidane or Al-Thani had signed the pieces of paper required to start it up, but that wasn't the case. The French decided merely to train police because police should become controversial. That failed because they couldn't get people to train. Clearly, it was wrong to maintain militias, and we clearly needed to go after terrorists, though clearly not with an army or a general purpose force, or with militias or police. It does leave a question as to what the right approach would be. School teachers, I don't think that would have necessarily been a better approach. So it is very easy for us to criticize every single approach that was tried because they all failed. Everything that I tried to do in terms of assistance at the time I was special envoy failed, all of it. I'm sure that's because of gaps in my competence. But while I look at my competence, I turn to USAID, I turn to DFID, I turn to our excellent Italian colleagues, our Turkish colleagues, our Egyptian colleagues. The only people who've been successful, as near as I can tell, are the Sudanese in providing arms, and the Emiratis in providing vehicles, which were photographed, and the Egyptians in providing planes with their tail numbers that were changed and photographed and sent in the panel of experts report. Everybody else's assistance programs weren't successful. So we focused on political things where we had a little more success, but insufficient. I still believe security is an issue, that there need to be domestic security forces that are integrated, that need to be human rights respecting and non-political in their orientation, that they should incorporate people from the former Libyan National Army, that they need to be geographically diverse and subject to civilian control. Those are my conclusions. It is true that Daesh controlled territory and was exploiting territory. That is gone now. You have AQIM cells, you have al-Marabitun cells, you have Ansar al-Sharia cells, but you don't have anyone exploiting substantial amounts of Libyan resources and territory, which is why I focused on Daesh. The problem of extremism continues to be a real one. It can best be, I think, countered through providing young men opportunities that don't involve gang activity. Again, gangs, guns, girls, glory, God, all mixed up together, which is a very powerful mix in any country. And so finding that alternative becomes very important. That's how I see it at this point.
Thank you very much. Now, we have about 10, 15 minutes for a few questions. Please address your question, introduce yourself, and address your question to one of the panelists. And make sure there is a question mark at the end of the... Do you really want to ask a question? Are you sure?
A comment too. Correction. A couple of things I wanted to just comment on is that I'm sick and tired of talks about inclusion, that this process is inclusive, this is the only process possible. The truth is, it has not been inclusive. There are swaths of Libyans that have not been included in any part of the discussions. Not least of them are the tribal alliances that still hold allegiances to Gaddafi, for example, who have been systematically, which is equivalent to what happened in Iraq. And that's why they will not participate in a stable Libya anymore. So that's one comment. The second is the extremism, and these groups in Libya are, like as I said, I mean, I know some secularist extremist groups in Libya and radicals. There are some Islamists who think every other Islamist is a radical except themselves. There is no way to do this. The practicality of the matter, the reality of the matter, no matter what we talk, the solution will have to be, like it or not, will be a military brutality that will enforce rules on the ground. That's the end of the story.
We have one question here. This gentleman here.
Mohammed Shina, Voice of America. My question is, with rival powers in Libya refusing to compromise, what is the most practical solution to end the civil war in Libya?
This is one of the big
To
discussions.
whom do you want to address the question? Okay, go here. There's one here.
Ken Meyercord, retiree. I have the solution. And it's the exact opposite of Ms. Mugger's conclusion that the solution has been taken out of the hands of the Libyans and it's up to the international community. What about banning the interference of all outsiders in Libyan affairs, whether it's foreign militias, foreigners coming to fight with the militias, or whoever providing arms and guns, or the UN trying to impose a government on Libya? Is there no hope of banning these outsiders from interfering in Libyan affairs?
Could I take this one first?
Yes, but let me get another one. I've asked people to ask a question mark. There is no question mark.
He said to the opposite of what you said.
Yes.
And I know.
Yes, it's happening the opposite exactly of what I'm saying.
My name is Michael Albin. I'm an independent researcher. I'd like to follow up on this gentleman's comment about the tribes. Libya is shot full of tribes whose role in the problems of the last few years have been very opaque. And do they have a role at all, or are they simply incorporated into the militias and or the extremist elements? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to start answering? Do you want to start, Jason, first?
So when I'm talking about U.S. leadership on this issue, it's precisely in boxing out the foreign meddling. So what you're saying is exactly what I've always been hoping Western leadership would be, both from the Tobruk-Tripoli split until the current situation that we're in. So I mean, we're seeing completely eye to eye there that the correct way to deal with the Libya file is to tell the Russians and the Egyptians, we don't want you meddling by supporting one actor over another. To get to what Jonathan was saying, not each side backing its patron. And obviously that requires Libyan leadership to want to have the Libyan dialogue process. To transition to the question of the role of tribes, this can be over-talked about, right? So there are neo-tribal actors, meaning people who draw on emotional and familial ties, but they're not technically tribes. Misrata is not a tribe, for example. And then various militias in the Nafusa Mountains, Arab ones such as Zintan and Rajban, draw on tribal loyalties, but they don't exactly focus as tribes. And then if we look in the east, for example, the Sada tribes, the historically noble tribes that were connected to the Senussia movement, they focus as tribes, but their tribal structures are still segmentary, and they operate differently in a 21st century context than they did when Evans Pritchard was describing them. So you can't look at the tribe itself as something like, take me to the leader of the Barasa or the Fawakir, because it just doesn't work that way. Tribal loyalties overlap with loyalties towards things like local councils and Haftar or the GNA or specific monetary patrons. And they do need to be studied, but in a competing matrix of loyalty, like to go back to the idea of you could be from New Jersey, but also be a Methodist, but also really love your alma mater of Harvard, right? So the tribe is only one aspect of a complex competing of loyalties, but the tribal loyalty could be a part of the solution in Libya because of the traditional mechanisms built into the Libyan tribal structure, such as mablag dam, meaning blood money, to prevent conflict of getting out of hand. So we need to obviously use traditional resolution mechanisms where they could be useful, overlapping with all of these other mechanisms and loyalties.
Keeping in mind that Libya in the last 30 years had 70% urbanization rate. So from what was a mainly countrywide, country-centered country, became into the cities, moved into the cities, and became an urbanized society for a large part of it. Alza, you want to say something?
No, I just want to say that I wish someone can tell these people to pull out of Libya. Just the situation is impossible. That's why I cannot give any. This is the reality. The reality is the geographic setting of Libya, where it is located, and all of these. It's only 1 hour from Tripoli to Rome, by the way, by flight. So just see how approximate Libya is to the southern of Europe. It's now that's the reality. And when I heard Mr. Jonathan Weyer speaking and how much these countries are involved in Libya, we have to deal with it as it is. We can't just imagine that they will pull out one day. It's impossible. So how can we deal with this situation? But Libya, don't also forget that Libya has only 6 million inhabitants. That's all. It's a small district in Cairo. and with all of, why the whole world cannot help solving this issue of 6 million people? Why? Is it that complicated?
Israel-Palestine is only 8.5 million people.
It's getting even more complicated than complicated. So I don't see the foreign intervention is providing any assistance to Libya. To the contrary, in my opinion. And this is my opinion.
Dan, you had a question.
Daniel Serwer, Professor at Johns Hopkins SAIS. I'm interested in the question of who should take leadership in the international community, and Jason has made a strong argument for the United States. I can't conceive that argument would work under current circumstances. And I can think of a much stronger argument for Italy to take the leadership, or at least for Europe to take the leadership. So why shouldn't we look to a division of labor in which the Europeans stand up to this problem? They have a great deal to gain from resolving it. And we, frankly, are preoccupied elsewhere.
One last question, the gentleman behind.
Yeah, my question is, given the fact that there are so many militias with guns, should there be a need for UN military interventions to disarm them or to stabilize Libya?
Okay, let's take that. Sorry, I can go for everybody.
Hi, Brian Stout, Foreign Policy Magazine. My question is for both Ambassador Weiner and Jason. Absent a grand consensus that you say should happen, to what extent would you agree with the assertion that U.S. and Russian interests in Libya converge more than they conflict? And the longer the U.S. avoids constructive engagement with Khalifa Haftar, do you think risk of losing post-conflict Libya to the Russian sphere of influence increases?
Yes. Jonathan, you want to take
Sure.
the question first?
The United States has not avoided constructive engagement with Haftar. That premise is wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
I met with him twice in 2016. One meeting was 8 hours long. The other was 5 hours long. the condition for U.S. military support for any Libyan player is that that Libyan actor or player is part of the government that we recognize. It's very straightforward. Haftar is invited to support the civilian government. He becomes part of the civilian government. Civilian government wants him to get support from us or others. He can get it. So the premise is wrong. We would like to see the major players come together and work together on a transitional basis until the next elections. That would make for a stronger, more stable, more prosperous Libya. That was the core of the policy. In terms of who takes the lead, in the last years of the Obama administration, the United States worked very closely with France, the United Kingdom, Italy, on an ongoing basis, sometimes to work with UAE and Egypt, sometimes to do outreach with Algeria, sometimes to do outreach with Qatar or Turkey, and sometimes in a constellation. There were a series of ministerials. Italy is well positioned in light of Paolo Gentilone's deep knowledge of Libya, an overall role in the Italian government, to take an extremely influential role in Europe and in the Mediterranean on these issues if Italy decides it's in their interests. If Italy does so, it will, as we would, need to do it with the French, the Brits, the Russians, the Algerians, the Egyptians, and other players, important actors who care about that country, Germany, UAE, for example. And that's appropriate. There has to be a integrated and aligned approach. In the end, US and Russia do have similar interests in Libya, along with everybody else. A stable country that's not divided, that's united. A country that's pumping enough oil to meet the needs of its people. A country where conflict is managed without people killing one another. A country that's able to build a future for its young people. A country that's able to deal with the immigration issue and stop being a transit area for criminal groups moving people from Africa into Europe. It's in everybody's interest. Will Russia play around to try and get a warm water port and create that as a possible option for itself? Sure, they like fishing in troubled waters. If there's an opportunity here to upset the Americans and reshape the balance and dynamics of power, they're going to likely explore that. But people explore all kinds of things without necessarily making dangerous decisions. You know, it's one thing to create an option for yourself. It's another thing to carry out that option. We saw Haftar sign pieces of paper aboard that Russian aircraft carrier, resplendent in his uniform. Nobody's made public what those documents are yet.
Maybe they were fake.
Could be. Could be fake news. I don't know. But in the end, the interests are most fundamentally aligned. Even for Sudan. Sudan likes selling weapons, you know, opportunistically. But in the end, it doesn't need to have an unstable border either. So I still believe there are tremendous opportunities to bring Libya together. Outsiders need not to exploit intra-Libyan tensions. And Libyans need not to allow outsiders to exploit those tensions or to gain advantage over other Libyans. And that gets to the point of Libyans saying, you invited the Russians in, you invited the Americans in, you invited the Italians in. It's time for Libya to be run by Libyans. And that impulse will constantly play out potentially to stabilize things. You want to have a foreign role that's reasonable and that is consistent with Libyan sovereignty and Libyan strength. And these values are so obvious, it seems to me that we ought to all continue to work towards them at a practical level. Thank you.
Thank you. We have just a very few minutes left, so I'd like to give each one. You want to start, and then.
Yeah. So, I completely agree with the important point that all foreign countries essentially have the same interest, and Libya shouldn't be a partisan issue. We want to see a united Libya exporting enough oil that it can support itself, and that Libyans are prosperous enough that their young people don't join Daesh. I don't see that Europe can succeed in playing the key interlocutor to help the Libyans get there. And that's a big change for me, because I used to think that the UK could be the mediator of the mediators, Daniel, and I don't see that now, because the Italians and the Brits lack the clout on the international stage to throw down the gauntlet to the Emirates or the Egyptians or the Russians, if you do X to destabilize or to work with these proxy actors, we will retaliate with Y. I used to believe that the Brits had that ability because of their historic ties in the Gulf region, but we've seen that they're not able to. They, are forced by their other concerns and Brexit and other things to, in a way, cede some of that international leadership role. Only the U.S. Has the ability to do those things, and we've even seen that in the Ukraine crisis. It's Europe's back door, but that doesn't allow the EU to lead on Ukraine, right? Because the EU doesn't have one unified foreign policy. It doesn't have one unified military force. So U.S. hard power and economic power and the coherence of our institutions means that even if the Europeans have greater interests in Libya, we seem to be the last man standing in terms of the ability to truly box out these spoiler actors, and for me, to use that stick against those who are making it impossible for the Libyans to try to work together and move forward on their problems. So, compelling case for U.S. leadership in Libya, maybe not, but last man standing, and if the U.S. doesn't step up, no one will, and we'll see the squabbling between all these other actors fighting for crumbs from the table.
Neveras?
Yeah, what I want to say that about the solutions of Libya's, as I mentioned at the beginning, that it should be kind of start locally, start from the ground, then go up, or work both sides, like start working nationality and also locally. This is one of the solutions in Libya. And I agree with half of that. We should also involve all the parts. I mean, come on, now we are like now 6 years or like almost 7 years from the revolution, so there is no more names like who was with the Gaddafi or who was not. I think it should be the solution in both sides, from the people, Libyan people from outside and also Libyan people from inside, and should be involved. And it should be involved, from my point of view, more locally, from the ground. We should break the militias. We should think how we can break the militias. Sometimes it's too easy and it's too difficult to take that, because like we have them, the guns, the weapons, and also the ideology, or like the people they already like involved with, I will say, like militias or like the gangs way or gangs thinkings. This is, and I hope we have more discussion about solutions, not about what happens before up to now. I think it's clear what's happened from before up to now, but we need to discuss more solutions, more options, how we can solve or resolve the situation in Libya.
Federica, you want to say something?
I think that this situation now in Libya has began with the foreigner intervention. And so I think that it's really time to change and to change our mind, both by the Libyan part that has to really want a united Libya and a country first, Libyan first, because every revolution comes from within, inside. So first of all, this is the most important thing that we have to think, and I'm telling to you that then you will go back, and this is the point. So Libyans must want a Libya united, a country. Secondly, of course, it's time for the foreign countries that they have to just help in this kind of unifying process. Because otherwise, if we have Russians giving men, weapons, machines, tools, Emirates, airplanes, and so on, it will be always a civil war, of course, because they have spoiled the process, the normal process of, let's say, natural selection at a political level, giving money, weapons to one actor or the other in the Libyan country, in the Libyan texture. So it's time to say enough. Because until we will have foreigners acting in this way, no peace for Libya, I think.
Thank you. Asa?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the fact that, in my opinion, again, that there is no coordination between states who are intervening in the Libyan situation. And I think the fact that there is conflict in Libya means that there is no coordination between these states intervening in Libya. I don't think that Italy can play a role in that regard, because Italy has special interests in Libya, and because also Italy is bound by the 2008 friendship agreement that says and stipulates clearly that Italy should not intervene in the internal affairs of Libya, as much as Libya should not intervene in the. So we have to look at the legal sides of the matter. It's not only politics. We don't give a blind eye to certain things because we want things to function. No, there are something called legal here, legal aspect that we have to respect and we have to concentrate upon. The last question is what is the exit for Libya? I think a general ceasefire by which the international interveners in Libya, the states who are intervening in Libya, should take responsibility not to stop intervening and stop helping one group against the other. During this ceasefire, elections should be taking place, which is the revival of the democratization process. We did so well. We had 3 general elections. Don't forget that were very successful. We had handover of power for the first time that happened in Libya. I think we had, let's say, symptoms of democracy in Libya. Why can't we revive it today? Why can't we revive it? This is the big question. Thank you very much.
Jonathan.
I have yet to find any country that has sent any weapons to Libya, with except of Sudan. The Sudanese foreign minister told me he sent them into both sides, but everybody else has denied it. Everyone else is abiding by it, including when they've had their stuff photographed, violating it. So it's a little hard to get people to say they're going to stop when they refuse to acknowledge that they're doing it in the first place. It is a bit of a problem. Alignment internationally, I continue things to be critical. Inclusion as broad as possible, including ex-Qaddafiites, ex-Salafists, or any other title of people who are willing to participate in the political process, is tremendously important. We're in a legal regime right now in Libya where, because of the amendments of the Constitutional Declaration, we're in murky territory. The political agreement that was signed was defective on its face because neither Martin Coburn nor Bernardino Leon kept it up to update it as the political process changed. So a bunch of the deadlines in it were already out on the day it was signed. So the principle of legality is a difficult one to put into place right now, absent getting the basic politics right. We need to continue to work on that. On the business and economic side, there's an enormous amount of work to do. The central bank and the Libyan National Oil Corporation are still mostly unitary institutions, but they're challenged in a variety of ways. The LIA, the Libyan Investment Authority, has at least 3 competing teams of people who claim to run it. So ultimately, there's going to have to be elections that get somebody elected and sort all of that out, so that you can strengthen legitimacy at the national level, and hopefully whoever is legitimate at the national level will then have the good common sense to start getting resources out at the local level so things can be built up locally, which is the way the country can re-strengthen itself and build itself from the future. The diversity of views reflected here today actually align, if you think about it from that point of view. In terms of blaming people from the past, I'm happy to blame every single person sitting here, all of you, anybody else who's ever thought the word Libya, because you can't really point to anyone having been remarkably successful in achieving a vision that's consistent with where Libya should have been. And so diagnosis is endless. In the end, I would say, though, there's been a failure of legitimate institutions being able to carry out actions effectively on behalf of Libyans with the consent of enough other Libyans to make it work. So Libyans fighting one another locally continues to be a really huge problem, and I don't mean just physical conflict, I mean bureaucratic conflict. And finding some way to get from that to something where we'll compromise, let's deal, let's solve problems, is going to be very important work for the time to come. Everybody needs to be working together on that, whether you're a Libyan or somebody trying to help Libya. That's how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Please join me in thanking our panelists for such important. Thank you very much.